right, here we go with another night of Behind the Point Spread. Good to have you along on a Wednesday night as we do this every single Wednesday night as we go behind the point spread in college football. Before we get started tonight, just remember that you can call into the show. You can ask questions. It's very simple. Just drop us a line at 402-543-5556. Again, that's 402-543-5556. If you want to participate in the show. And you can also have a little fun with us and follow us and subscribe to our channels. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can like our Facebook page. You can follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. You can follow me, Travis Justice, on Twitter at Travis Creates. Now we're going to bring in the smartest man in the whole wide world, Dr. Rob. Is because last week we're sitting here on Behind the Point Spread, and Scott Spreitzer just drops this bomb that Paul Chryst is going to get fired, and holy shit, it happens. It fucking happens.
He's a wizard.
Yes. I liked Rob's comment last week was something like, when a guy in Las Vegas is talking about the head coaching job at Wisconsin and what might happen, and I thought felt bad for Paul Chryst, but I was kind of laughing about that as I thought about it, when it happened a couple of days after the show. But listen, thought he was going to get canned, but I thought he had till the end of the season. I was surprised when it happened, but there's been a lot of talk. Remember, DocSports.com is originally from Sauk City, Wisconsin.
You said that. Maury something, yes, right?
Maury Mosman.
Yeah.
And, but no, I just felt like from all the talk that he was going to be gone if they lost a couple more games this season. Losing to Illinois and getting canned, I thought was awfully blunt and early. Made me look good, but it was just one of those things where I didn't think he'd make it. I didn't think, next year at the spring ball, you'd be seeing Paul Chryst on their sideline. There was some talk coming out of Wisconsin that if he didn't really put together a nice winning streak, he was gone. I think maybe if he loses 20-17, a little bit closer variety where maybe they lose on a bad luck play or something, that maybe he's still around. But, 2 yards rushing from a program that values rushing,
And one of the best running backs in the country, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, I hope you didn't mind. We totally exploited the clip, and we ran it all over YouTube and social media to totally, promote Behind the Point Spread.
I'm all for it. Exploitation, promotion. I'm on board anytime. Listen, I've seen my face, my still photos on some bad stuff before, so I like the good stuff. And not that it was good stuff for Paul Chryst. Again, I don't like watching coaches get canned, all that kind of stuff. Those are predictions I'd rather not have come true. But again, if you could promote away, man.
Look at that shirt Rob's wearing, Scott. He's got the old Big 8 shirt on, huh?
It's still my favorite T-shirt. Well, yeah. It's up there. It's my top. It's top 5, but yeah, I love this shirt.
What came to my mind when I saw that shirt, Rob, and I don't know if you remember these guys. But
here's Rob's favorite T-shirt, by the way.
Oh,
See,
okay.
Here's what we need to do because we're shameless promoters here, Scott.
Okay,
is that we now have a clothing line. So if you haven't ordered your Sorry Dave, when we lose or win or lose, we drink booze shirt, or the diverse portfolio shirt, or it's called Life Grab a Helmet shirt, you can do that. Just go to Raygun Custom /collections /Husker Doc Talk, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. But we're talking about T-shirts, so everybody needs to go buy one of these T-shirts. How's that?
I like it. I might have to get myself one of those.
I'm a shameless promoter. I'll sell anything, man.
Should I wear a Sorry Chryst shirt next week?
Well, see, here, so sorry, you may not know this. So here's the story behind the hashtag Sorry Dave. So Dave Remington Trophy. See that? Remington Trophy. Sure, yeah. He used to be the sponsor of our podcast. Well, he didn't like it that we swore a lot. Okay. So
I don't know if it was so much he didn't like it. He just started he listened to the podcast and was listening in the car with his kids one day.
Yeah.
And this was when his kids were younger.
Yeah.
And it was one of these episodes, Trav and I started going off on each other, and we're dropping F-bombs left and right. And like you said, you get a call from Dave the next day where you're like, hey, I'm driving in my car. I'm taking the kids to school. I'm listening to the podcast. It's great. My kids are asking questions about Nebraska football. And next thing, what's fuck mean, Dad? It's like, can you guys maybe like tone it down on the,
that's classic.
On the F-bombs?
So what every time we swear on the podcast now, we say sorry, Dave. And so it's just become
which is what we would do. I mean,
yes.
Sure. We didn't drop the F-bombs. We would just say sorry, Dave, every time.
Listen, I don't like to cuss on air, but man, did anybody get off the ball quicker than fucking Dave Remington? You know?
Look at
Sorry,
Scott Spreitzer dropping the F-bomb. And
I
the
mean,
answer to
my
that is no.
gosh, that was crazy when I used to go to those games and watch him. Looked like it was 5 yards offsides before the quarterback started taking his first step back away from the line of scrimmage. What an incredible talent. But I have to say, when I saw that Big 8 shirt, here's what came to my mind, not even football. It was Carl McPipe, Brian Banks, Joe Cipriano, Mo Iba, Spoonhour. All of a sudden, all these names for the basketball team started popping into my head.
Wow.
Andre Smith,
Big 8 basketball was awesome.
With Jay Randolph on the Saturday play-by-play, man, I miss that stuff.
That's the old Raycom, isn't it?
And that Big 8 basketball.
Isn't that the old Raycom with Jay Randolph?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That voice, man. You know.
Wow, that's a good reference. Before we start diving into this week's games, I do want to bring up a game from last week because you were big on Iowa State. We were talking about bad beats, and it really wasn't a bad beat, but well, it might have been. Iowa State, you were high on the Cyclones last week. I think he actually went in on them. There's a classic example of you can't take into account coaching, penalties, and special teams when you do your power rankings, can you?
Well, I guess you can't, every week unless they do it every week. And so, maybe the mismanaged game by a coach and all that kind of stuff. There's one we're all familiar with that just, was in Lincoln who you could factor it into your handicapping. But, when you saw a team give up 210 yards and gain, over 100 yards than their opponent and have the ball several times inside the other team's 30 and come away with 3 missed field goals, or you've got a 4th down play where you call a 2-yard pass and you need 8 or whatever it was. That's just and it wasn't even like he went through his progressions, when he's looking. It's like drop back, quick pass over the middle. Oh, good. You gained 2 yards. It wasn't even like look downfield, nothing's open. Let's find a safety valve. But that second half, I was just dumbfounded by some of the mismanagement by the Iowa State coaching staff. And I'm thinking, man, is this really what you want in Nebraska, Husker fans? You want another guy who's going to find a way to keep games close and a lot of times lose close games. We just went through that, for the last 5 years. So I was disappointed. Listen, that's not the worst loss I've ever had or even close to it. It's not like a bad loss. I mean, I took a chance with a number that was short and it didn't come through. We ended up going 4-3 last week overall with college and pro and lost my top play, which wasn't Iowa State. Iowa State was a smaller play. Western Kentucky was my top play last week. So we won the top play in the pros, lost the top play in college. And if I can go 4-3 every week, I'm a really happy guy. But it was disappointing because it felt like 5-2 more than 4-3. But yeah, just watching that Cyclone game, I mean, it's like, holy cow, your players have basically done everything they're supposed to except for the kicker. And then on the sideline, the coaching mismanagement. I thought that's what did them in.
Yeah, and Matt Campbell's name keeps getting thrown around, still for Nebraska, up in Wisconsin now. Rob, you're shaking your head. You're saying no way.
Okay, we've talked about this on the podcast.
We have.
I think we probably talked it on Behind the Point Spread a few times. I've never been sold on Matt Campbell, and I keep going back to, I'm broken record here saying this. He'll knock off Texas. He'll knock off Oklahoma. He'll lose to Kansas. He'll lose to Missouri. I guess Missouri's not in the Big 12 anymore. But you know what I mean? He'll knock off a couple of big teams and a couple of really big games and make you think, okay, this is the year that he's going to finally turn the corner and go from pretty good to wow, this guy's great. I worry about a guy like that coming to a conference like the Big 12, going to the SEC. Sure. I think going to the Big 10 or the SEC. I think if he's in the Big 12, he's going to keep punching out 8-9 win seasons, but he's never going to get over the hump in his own conference.
Well, this week. And this weekend's interesting because they play Kansas State at home, and they're a home dog, if I'm not mistaken, Scott. But I think both, and we're going to talk about Iowa a bit later on, I think both Iowa and Iowa State are at a crossroads for the season this year. Iowa especially going to Illinois, and I think if Iowa State loses to Kansas State, all of a sudden the Cyclones are 0-3 in the Big 12, and that puts them with Texas coming up, with Oklahoma State coming up, with Oklahoma coming up. I know Oklahoma's not what we thought they were, but those aren't easy games by any means.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, it's like if he loses a third game in 3 tries against Big 12 opposition, doesn't that take away from whatever resume people are looking at that have made him, in every coaching circle that you hear for a job that's open right now? I mean, you look at some of the guys that have been there the last few years as far as some of the players, and he's had some really nice players. But as Rob said, he always pulls that one upset a year at home in Ames, tough place to play even before he got there. And then he goes on the road, he loses some stupid play somewhere along the line, a stupid game that he shouldn't lose. And they're 8-4. And that doesn't seem like, okay, maybe it sounds really good to Husker fans right now, but you don't want 7-5, 8-4, 7-5, 8-4 every year. That's not what you're shooting for. Not when you got 80, 90,000 people in the crowd and you got that kind of money behind it, the facilities that they have in Lincoln. I mean, that's not what you want. So,
well, and I feel like he's undercoaching some. He's had some really good football players.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Brees Hall, Brock Purdy, Xavier Hutchinson this year is a hell of a receiver. Hell, I think Hunter Deckers is a really good quarterback. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. And that's why I think this week is at a crossroads. By the way, Iowa State, not one of the 4 games we're going to look at tonight. One of the 4 games we're going to look at is down in the SEC. And this is an intriguing matchup, Scott. Tennessee is going to be at LSU. As much as I hate to admit it, the Brian Kelly experiment is off to a better start than I thought it was going to be in Baton Rouge. But Tennessee, the Vols go to Death Valley, a 3-point favorite. The over-under at 65 on this game.
was that hope or was that what you thought? I mean, were you hoping to see him?
I can't stand him. I can't stand him. It was the fake accent when he got there. It to me,
the weird dancing with recruits.
Yeah, and here's the deal. He's an East Coaster. My daughter, I got a daughter that lives in Mississippi. I've got another daughter that lives in New Orleans. It's a culture. If you're not ready for the culture, man, it will eat you up. And I just don't see him being the East Coast guy that he is. I mean, and being from Cincinnati, the New England area, then up in Michigan, and then to Cincinnati, Notre Dame. That's just a weird fit for me. It's just weird.
Well, I don't disagree at all. I mean, as far as this game, though, Tennessee's laying a field goal. LSU beat Auburn on the scoreboard last week, but LSU was outgained by 168 yards in that game, 438 to 270 against what had been a very badly struggling Auburn team. They trailed LSU 17-0 in the third quarter. And then, of course, Auburn has the 4 turnovers. Here's the post-game win expectancy, and I'll explain what that is. The post-game win expectancy for Tennessee after the game, for LSU after the game went final was 8%. And post-game win expectancy is a metric or a formula which lists how you would expect a team to win a game based on how well they actually played in the game, their chances to win that game based on how they played. Well, they got outgained, like I mentioned, 438 to 270. They took advantage of 4 turnovers, and their post-game win expectancy, again, was 8%. 92%, that was Auburn's post-game wins expectancy, which is another bad, maybe not all the nails in the coffin, but just another bad nail in the coffin for the current Auburn regime. Tennessee's defense is getting very little respect right now, guys. They keep talking about the fantastic Tennessee offense, and it is that. It's a really good offense. But this defense has been solid against the run. And you mentioned Brian Kelly. If Brian Kelly teams can't run the football, they normally can't pass either because everything's based around what they do behind the line of scrimmage, trying to move forward on the ground. And I think LSU is going to be in a little bit of trouble here. So I don't think it's a blowout by any means. I'm not going to be shocked if LSU finds a way to win just like they did last week. But I think Tennessee walks off the field with a 7-point win here.
Rob, does the Josh Heupel coaching, does he surprise you as a coach?
A little bit. And I guess I'm kind of going back to what Scott just said there about their defense and how good their defense looks. You go back, you look at Heupel. Now, wasn't Heupel he was at UCF right after Scott?
Yeah. So he took, and then Danny White brought it. So Danny White hired, here's the weird circle of Danny White hired Lance Leipold at Buffalo. Danny White becomes the athletic director at UCF, and then Scott Frost leaves. He hires Josh Heupel. That next year, he becomes the athletic director at Tennessee and just brings Heupel right along with him.
And I liked what Heupel did at UCF. I mean, if you look at him, I think it was that next year, which it's not like they didn't have pretty good football players, but he went into, I think, wasn't it the Sugar Bowl game against LSU that very next year after UCF beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl? Heupel took them into the Sugar Bowl against LSU. LSU won the game. UCF lost, but it was kind of a slugfest the whole game. And I believe UCF was without Mackenzie Milton in that game. So that was a game without Mackenzie Milton. They put up a bunch of points. They kind of slugged it out with LSU. LSU won. Talk the chance of SEC after the game, but it was kind of one of those like, yeah, you guys barely beat UCF. Right now, UCF's still looking like a really good team. I'm impressed with what he's done ever since UCF all the way up through Tennessee. But like Scott said, the thing that's impressive to me is that when you've watched Heupel teams, they've had good offenses.
Yes.
This is a really good defense. And that's the thing that kind of sets them apart is that like right now, I'm kind of looking at Heupel and going, God, I wonder if this guy would come to Nebraska.
I'll take him.
You know, he can coach offense.
Yep.
He's got Tennessee playing great defense right now. That's my worry about a guy like Leipold that's coming to Nebraska. We're going to have this Bill Callahan offense and a shitty defense. And we're going to be kind of not that good.
Yeah.
I kind of worry about something like that with a guy like Leipold. So, but no, that's a surprising thing. I agree with Scott. It's just how good their defense looks right now.
So Brian asked on the YouTube channel, he says, did the value run out on Kansas this week? A lot of pressure now in Lawrence, game day, ranked, national spotlight. Well, Brian, it's interesting that you would bring up KU because KU is actually our next game on the docket as TCU under the leadership. Remember Max Duggan, who's from Council Bluffs Lewis Central. He was not the starter for TCU when the year started. Remember, Sonny Dykes picked a different quarterback to be the starter at TCU. That guy got hurt. Duggan comes in and last week had one of the best games of his, almost a Heisman-like game. And TCU a 7-point favorite, which is pretty handy, pretty good size going on the road. And look at the over/under here, 68.5. Scott, is the magic out for KU?
I thought they lost value going into last week's game. We kind of talked about that setup with Iowa State, that if the game would have been, the first game of the season and Kansas hadn't got into that game 3-0 or 4-0, whatever they were, you were going to be getting 10 points with Kansas at home. Instead, they were getting 3. So the value kind of ran out on Kansas last week. The problem is that Matt Campbell took away the value of back in Iowa State. Sonny Dykes is not Matt Campbell. Sonny Dykes is not going to make dumb moves or mismanage his football team. So this line, by the way, you saw on the screen, it was 7. That's because about an hour and a half ago, it was 7 everywhere. And within the last 45 minutes, right before we started the show, 6.5 started popping up all over the place. And I'm a little surprised that it did come down because I do know, there was like one syndicate that was going to jump in and take the points with Kansas if it got to 7, but it had taken so long for them to make a move. I thought maybe they decided to pass. So what happens a lot of times, let me explain this real quick. What happens a lot of times when you see a number move, like I've got a line service that I pay, X amount of dollars for every month, and I've had it for several years. And I can, you could put like one book on your screen, or you could build it to where there's 50 sports books from all over the world on your screen. I basically have about 18. I take the tops in Vegas, the tops in the US, Costa Rica, Central America, all over, British, all that kind of thing. And I put about 18 to 20 books on my screen. And when you see one book drop, let's say from a key number of 7 down to 6.5, a lot of times, boom, 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 you'll see folks following the leader. Doesn't mean they got hit. It means maybe somebody impressive with deep pockets that's respected hit it in one particular book or 2 books, and everybody else is like, let's drop our number before we get hit too. It's kind of one of those things. And so that might have been what happened with this game, is that others were protecting themselves. This line was as low as 4.5 at one point when this line opened up. It got to as high as 7, down to 6.5 now. And again, after what everybody saw last week, Kansas catching some lucky breaks. That's why that early week money started coming in on TCU right away. Plus, there's that recent game bias on TCU where they looked like they could have run up 800 yards and 75 points if they wanted to against Oklahoma. So it's obviously the best team KU will have faced. The Sonny Dykes offense is ridiculously tough and efficient. The big question to me is whether or not TCU comes in with a celebration hangover or not off of that big impressive win over Oklahoma, the way they kicked them sideways all game long. But here's something that the casual sports fan probably won't know. TCU is the number 3 team in college football in yards per point margin. It's a little over 3. Yards per point is the amount of points a team scores per the amount of yards gained. That's the offense. On defense, it's the amount of yards allowed per the amount of yards given up.
These are metrics I've never heard of.
Well, when you combine the two, and you got a team like that's a pretty damn good football team. And you'll see like the teams like Bama, Georgia, all the normal teams that are at the top of the rankings and playing for national titles, they're always highly ranked in yards per point. And so TCU is now number 3 in the nation in yards per point margin, which means they're playing great offense, also pretty darn good defense at the same time. And I know the line feels a little bit high, but I think TCU comes out of here with about a 10-point win. Little caveat in there is the fact that, it looks like maybe that syndicate came in on Kansas. That's a little bit of a caveat. And by syndicate, I don't mean nothing nefarious. There's nothing nefarious. It's just a group who has a whole lot of money, deep pockets, is known to win, may have come in on this game.
Interesting. Rob, Dr. Tom Osborne was a statistician. He had his PhD in stats. Did he ever break down the points per yard equation like that? Because I've never heard of
points per yard breakdown, but he was into the metrics, and I think a lot of coaches were all along, although Osborne was an ed psych major, which is basically it's a stats major is what it is. So that was what his doctorate was in. So yeah, we saw a lot of weird stats that he always wanted us to try, and that was what we were actually.
I don't
like
even
9/10 of our goals were based around some set of stats.
Really, that's good to know. I mean, from a guy who was coaching back then, so to speak.
Yeah.
Scott, I don't even know how you would put that in layman's terms. I mean, you said it, and I'm still confused by what's the true value.
Here you go. They kick ass on both sides of the football.
See, that's all you had to say, man. But I can look at that and go, all right, I get that.
What's funny is a lot of these guys, every baseball team basically has an office now with like 5 guys. It's their sole job. Like if you ever saw, what was the movie about the Oakland A's? Was it Moneyball?
Yeah, Moneyball.
Yeah, Moneyball. So every team has that now. 4 or 5 guys that are working on all the metrics and the newfangled stuff. And a guy that I am a really good friend with here in Las Vegas, he has a radio show here in Vegas. He's like this. If I can, yeah, there you go. He's like this with his fingers crossed with Dusty Baker. I mean, they're really tight and like good friends. Go out to dinner, come to Vegas. We'll take you out to dinner, the kind of stuff. And Dusty told him, and he told me, my friend, that Dusty's been looking at metrics for 30 years.
Really?
But we, like I would have never known Dr. Tom was looking at, stats, in the 90s or the 80s in a metric kind of sense. So it's interesting to find out some of these managers, these coaches, like you got the guy in San Francisco with the Giants who's overboard. I mean, it's way overboard when it comes to using metrics, but I think it has to be factored in,
Well, I mean, over a course of a season, absolutely has to be factored in. Sure. Here's what I know: through 5 games this year, the Iowa Hawkeye offense is horrible. It's just it's absolutely huge. But you know what? And I'm a Hawk fan. And it pains me to say this. They moved from 131 to 130th in total offense this week. The only thing worse is Jay Norvell's Colorado State offense. It's bad, and they wouldn't have if it wouldn't been for the last drive of the game against Michigan, where Michigan just basically went into prevent and let them score a touchdown and let them get up to 380 or 281 last week. This is an interesting game with Iowa at Illinois. Illinois coming off the big win at Wisconsin. That was they've lost, I believe, 8 in a row to Iowa heading into this. It's a night game. Illinois with the best running back in the country yards wise right now, and will be a 3.5-point favorite on Saturday night.
It's funny you mentioned Jay Norvell real quickly in Colorado State because my daughter has been trying to convince me I need to come up on Friday for the Nevada-Colorado State game. Are you kidding me? Like I'm going to go to that? I've been through enough pain watching UNLV over the years. By the way, we're 4-1. We'd probably beat Nebraska. You notice I'm saying we right now. It's the first time I've said we about UNLV football in my lifetime. So anyway, Iowa at Illinois. Illinois laying 3.5, total 36.5. The total up is up, by the way, from 35.
I saw that. I did notice that.
It's creeped up a little bit. Well, it's those powerful offenses, man, driving that number up. But this line has been as high as 4. It's now sitting at 3.5, as you saw. Public all over the Illini in this one. Number 1 defense in the nation in scoring defense, it's Illinois. It's no longer Iowa. Iowa's dropped, I think, to 3rd. But they're also number 8, Illinois is, in yards per game margin. Here we go again with the metrics. That's Illinois, yards per game margin. They are number 8 in college football. Now, some will argue that the schedule hasn't been too tough, but before they, laid the wood to Wisconsin, would you have thought they were going to lay the wood to Wisconsin? And nobody could really say that. I didn't. So who's going to benefit from the other team's mistakes? I mean, Iowa hasn't committed a turnover in 3 games or whatever. Illinois finished +3 turnover margin against Wisconsin. Both teams want to get the ground game going. Illinois held Wisconsin at 2 yards rushing. I'm looking at my notes right now that I made before the show. Illinois, top 10 in the nation in time of possession, 35 minutes per game.
Wow.
Iowa's defense gets tired because that offense is never out there. That may come into play. And again, when I talk about efficient running games, and Rob can either back this up or disagree with it, when I say get your efficient running game going, I'm not talking about you got to bust 4 50-yard runs. I'm talking about 3.7, 3.8 yards per gain on the ground on first down. I think that's an efficient running game. And it leads to that time of possession, exactly. So I'm going to lean towards Illinois. 99% sure this won't make my card this week, but I'll lean to Illinois. That half point scares me a little bit, that 3.5. If it's 3, I'd probably take a shot with Illinois. And I'm talking by a shot, I'm talking pizza money. I'm not talking anything serious here.
So here's a question, Travis. You look at what happened to Paul Chryst. I mean,
no, it's not going to happen. No. It's never going to happen.
Brian?
No. Well, that's the interesting part. And listen to this. It's kind of interesting. Listen to this question yesterday, and hopefully you guys can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but this is a question that was asked to current parents yesterday.
Would you ever anticipate changing up your staff in the middle of the season?
For what purpose?
Any purpose. I mean,
yeah, if you thought it was going to serve an end, yeah, absolutely. But I've never been in that situation as an assistant or a head coach. Certainly as an assistant, I never thought I should be changed. I mean, that was never on my mind.
So he would, for what purpose? I didn't show the video of it, but he was pissed because everybody knew it's the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, right? Everybody wants to say, "Hey, are you going to fire your son?" And that's what they want to ask. Rob, if Brian Ferentz leaves, it will be one of these things where he magically got a job in the National Football League, probably with one of Kirk's buddies who, I need to get more experience, do this, right? It's hard to fire your own kid. As far as Kirk Ferentz getting fired, ain't ever going to happen. Just not. I mean, him and Gary Barta joined at the hip. When Kirk Ferentz leaves, Gary Barta will leave. That's just the way it's going to be. I mean, they will not pull a Paul Chryst there.
What is Brian? I keep getting confused. Is Brian the quarterback's coach or the O coordinator?
Well, he's both now. And so he was the offensive line coach. They moved him over after Ken O'Keefe stepped down after the season to be the quarterback's coach, and he's the offensive coordinator. The offense is just bad. There's just nothing there, right? And all they do is talk about, well, it's getting better in practice. I'm going to go Allen Iverson. Practice? We're talking about practice. Nobody cares what happens in practice. They care about what happens in the game. When your quarterback doesn't get hit in practice and he gets hit in the game, it's not the same type of drill. And this offense is just not fun to watch. So there, I'm with Scott here. I'm not going to bet this game either, but I just sit back and watch. And two teams that want to run the football, it could be, whew.
Like it's a 20-17, 20-16 type of game, and it's right there where the line is. And I saw, the off season, a lot of us were talking. We do our preview shows in Vegas, and we're like, what did he deserve? Talking about young Ferentz, what did he deserve to go from a quarterback's coach to an OC? He's been the OC since Greg Davis left. He's been the OC for the last 3 or 4 years. Well, but I mean, what did he do to deserve that?
Nothing.
And then he's coaching quarterbacks, and it's like.
He's never coached quarterbacks before. He was a perfect offensive line coach, but Polasek was who's now is at Wyoming or K-State. I forget where I forget where he's at. But he came from North Dakota State, was the offensive line coach. Brian took over that. Then he went over to be the quarterback's coach, which makes zero sense. It's just not a good offense there right now. Now, Nebraska put up 35 last week. In a game against Indiana. They actually covered last week. And they go on the road this week, a Friday night game where Nebraska is a 3-point favorite against Rutgers. Your total here at 49, Scott.
This would open up Nebraska a 1-point favorite when the lines first came out on Sunday for this week, and they've been bet up to 3. The public, though, is on Rutgers in this one, which means kind of right now you got sharper money on the Huskers. There they go again. And then you've got the public money on Rutgers because the public tends to bet what they see. And that ain't a bad way to go sometimes because sharp money's come in on Nebraska a few times this particular season, and those sharp bettors have been hurt by it. So anyway, it's a situation where the line has moved towards the Huskers. You got the Mickey Joseph hype going. You got the Husker fans on board after just one win, but it came against a weak opponent. We talked about that game on the show last week, and I thought Nebraska would score 38. I just didn't know if they could hold Indiana under 35. That was the problem. But we did see a defense that was in the right place before snap. We saw it's funny, I was doing the show last Saturday night. We got, a bank of like 8 TVs in front of us that are probably 70, 80 inches in the studio with the sports book right behind us. And we got 8 games on, and the Nebraska game's up in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm kind of watching it, but not really. And I did say on air, I go, wow, I'm watching this Nebraska game. I go, they actually look like they're flying to the ball a little bit, but I've only seen a few plays. It was in the second half. But it seemed like they did. And everything I've heard from everybody back there is they started flying to the play, on defense. They looked like they knew what they were trying to accomplish for one of the few times this year. So there is that. But again, here's a chance to impress against a bad Rutgers offense. But I just wonder if Nebraska can pass against a Rutgers defense, which has not played badly against the pass, even if you throw that loss to Ohio State into the mix. Total mismatch, different pedigree, the whole thing. But I'm not ready to back Nebraska on the road, guys. I watched the celebration. I thought it was cool. Game ball to Mickey. Every Husker fan seems to be in Joseph's, corner now for the head coaching job. But my gosh, can they win 3 or 4 more games before we even start thinking about that? I don't trust him. And Noah Vedril's in his 18th year. Don't know if he's going to play or not this week. I think we talked about that before. They've got 2 of their top players, Vedril, then they've got their playmaker at wide receiver, who got kicked out of the game last week, I believe. And we'll see if they're able to go here. But, gosh, man, I hate to pass on these 2 key games that we like to talk about because of where we're doing the show, the Nebraska game and the Iowa game. But I think that's the smart move, is to pass these 2 games.
Well, I think you said something. You said you went 4-3 last week, right? And that was NFL and college combined, right?
Yep.
So I think people think somebody in your position bets like 30 games a week, and that's just not the case. You're smart, like most people should be. You should be smart when you bet, and you pick 7 games out and you go with them, right? I mean, it's not. What's the most you play in a week?
I played 30 games on a weekend before. I don't look for a set number. Here's what I like. And by the time I get done doing injuries, and, like a couple of beat writers, talking to a couple of beat writers about, like Vedril or something. Is he going to play? What's going on? Then I'll shave my card down. And last week it just happened to be 7. I did not like the college card. I also had like 3 games I was going to get involved in that I stayed away from because of the hurricane. And so I just decided there's just no reason to mess with that game because you don't know what the weather is going to be like in the Carolinas. So there was like 3 or 4 games that I just totally took off the list because of the hurricane. Otherwise, I would have had 10 or 11 games. But like tonight, I'm going to be paring. I've got like 25 games between pro and college that I'll start paring down tonight that I'm in on so far. And by tomorrow at this time, I'll have it knocked down to anywhere from 7 to 11 games. College basketball. Man, by the time it's said and done, in-game betting, I could have 45 bets on a Saturday. It's crazy, it's just. But again, I try to not have a ton of games. There's some who subscribe to the idea that you need to be playing all these kind of games, 20, 25 games. I'm a little bit more conservative than that. It's what works for me over the years.
Hey, quick reminder, we want you to watch the Doc's Diagnosis. If you haven't watched it, there's good stuff there. Dr. Rob draws up plays each and every week. He does it on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It's brought to you by Centris Federal Credit Union. So when you get a chance, go to the YouTube page right now, subscribe to our channel, and watch all of this week's Doc's Diagnosis. And if you're looking for something to do on Saturday, Olympic gold medalist, NCAA champion, and 2-time first-team All-American Jordan Larson is going to be at Husker Hounds on the 84th and Center location. Of course, if you're from Nebraska and you follow Nebraska volleyball, you know that Jordan Larson, who went to Loganview up there in Hupper, Rob, is one of the greatest maybe to ever wear a Nebraska uniform in the volleyball court. And again, just coming off her international career. But she'll be at Husker Hounds from 1 to 2:30, signing autographs, $15 per autograph. So go see Jordan Larson at Husker Hounds on Saturday. Of course, if you like what you hear from Scott Spreitzer, and we do, that's why we have him on each and every week, you can work with him each and every day. All you have to do is text the word Doc Talk to 29022, and you're going to get a text link where you have access to all of Scott's important pages, such as his daily free pick videos, as well as a page where you can sign up to get $60 in Scott's premium member-only picks. Again, the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 for more free picks from Scott 7 days a week. And make sure to follow him at DocSports.com and at Scott Wins on Twitter. Before I let you guys go, I'm going to ask you just a random question, because we were talking about Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold, stuff like that. Last year, Lincoln Riley was the big surprise, right? Lincoln Riley was the, oh my God, I can't believe he left the program. Give me a coach at the end of this year, and we'll see where we're at the end of this. Give me a coach that we go, holy crap, he just left.
He's getting greedy, Rob, after we gave him Chryst last week.
I am. I'm getting greedy. But see, we won't know until the end of the year. I'll start.
Gosh, that's tough.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'll let you guys think. I think Mike Gundy leaves Oklahoma State.
For a better job or?
For a better job.
Okay.
I think, I mean, the dude could be playing for a title this year, or at least in the playoff. I mean, he's had it pretty. I think that could be one of those surprise. Wow, he left his alma mater. With Oklahoma and Texas leaving, Bedlam over with. There just might be an incentive enough to go somewhere else and see if he works. So Mike Gundy is my wow. I can't believe he just left that job.
I'm going with Lane Kiffin.
Wow, there you go. That's not a bad one.
Good one. I like that.
That's a really good one.
Yeah,
I
there's already talk about it. I mean, there's the whole fan thing, but I don't know. That just sounds like a coach who feels like he's doing some very good things where he's at and doesn't have appreciation for it.
Yep. That's a great.
Well, my daughter works at Ole Miss. They do not want Lane to leave. I promise you that. The administration loves Lane Kiffin because he's brought a lot of students to Ole Miss in the last couple of years.
I think Lane Kiffin is the best guess, followed by your guy down at Mike Gundy down at. I'll give you one that's not going to happen. But boy, man, if Venables was in his second year, if he gets dusted a couple more times this year, Chip Kelly leaves UCLA. Leaves the limelight of Los Angeles and heads to Norman for bigger money.
That's a good pick.
That's a good pick, too. I think those are three really, really good picks. But yeah, so we'll see. I just think one of us, probably Rob's, going to be right.
I like Rob's pick.
Yeah.
I don't know. The more I think about it, I'm thinking about Chip Kelly, and I'm like, I think that makes sense to me because I'm picturing Chip Kelly going to the Big Ten and going like, yeah, I don't like this shit. I need a Pac-12-esque kind of.
Well, wouldn't it be nice to get fan support? I mean, the guy's got smaller crowds than we get for UNLV at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
I don't know if he goes to Oklahoma, but I could see him going to some place and I don't know, maybe he goes to Iowa State to take Matt Campbell's spot.
Wow, look at that. Look at that.
I think Venables gets at least one more year. I really do.
I don't know. If he loses a couple more, he may be on the way out. Don't forget, tonight's show is brought to you is for entertainment purposes only. And if you have a gambling problem, make sure to call 1-800-BETS-OFF. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our Facebook. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. Follow me at Travis Creates. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will see you, programming note, next Thursday. So the next 2 weeks are going to be on Thursday because Scott has an engagement next Wednesday. I have an engagement the next Wednesday after that. So for the next 2 weeks, does that work for you, Rob? Does that work for you when we go on Thursday next week?
That should work.
All right. So next 2 weeks, we're going to go on Thursday for Behind the Point Spread. Bet safe, be smart, and go win some money this weekend. And we'll talk to you next week on Behind the Point Spread.